Welcome to the Nonfiction Writers, podcasting in a great way. I'm Ryan Aber, joined by Jason Kersey, and today, special guest from the Lawrence Journal World, Matt Tate. Matt, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Doing fantastic. Getting ready for this game on Saturday. I don't know what Kansas's time schedule has been, but OU, it seems like every game this season has been at 11 a.m. It's just becoming routine for us.
That's crazy. Yeah, that was exactly how it was last year for KU, and this is actually, I think, the first 11 a.m. game they've had all year, which
Wow.
shocks me because, you get used to, when you cover KU football, you get used to them just putting it on the early time slot so no one has to watch it and everybody moves on with their lives. But I've been shocked. It's been almost all 2 or 3 o'clock this whole season. So when I saw the OU 11 a.m. one, I thought, wow, that's really weird. I might have to wake up and remember how to do that.
Yeah, we've definitely gotten used to it. It's nice and the deadline pressure at the back
Absolutely.
end, but waking up that early and getting to the stadium, not so much.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So, I guess I got lucky this year. You guys didn't, but it does surprise me. I mean, it makes sense with Kansas. It makes sense when it's a team that's, not going to get great ratings. But for OU, that's shocking.
Yeah, and it's been strange because even some of their bigger games. Obviously the Baylor game wasn't what we thought it would be before the season, but still that game was at 11 a.m. The Kansas State game at the time was a pretty big game that week, and it was at 11 a.m. So it wasn't like they were just playing, the dregs of the league at 11 a.m. They got some pretty good teams that got scheduled in those slots.
Yeah, I guess I learned this not last year, but a couple years ago when I was trying to figure out the KU time slot thing and predict the next time and all that stuff. And I guess, they do look at like the other SEC games or the other, Big Ten games. And then, so sometimes if there's a marquee, say Alabama Auburn is at 7 o'clock that night, then, even Oklahoma Baylor, they wouldn't want to, the Big 12 wouldn't want to put that against Alabama Auburn nationally. So they'll put that at the 11 a.m. game or whatever. It has everything. It's run by the TV thing. You guys know that. But that was kind of something I learned that made a little more sense when I was trying to figure out, how all that went down and why they would put some of those big games, big Big 12 games like that in there. But obviously it's just to get as many eyes on them as they can.
Yeah. Matt, with KU this year, obviously seems like they've made some improvement over the last few weeks. But were you surprised that they made the decision to let Charlie Weis go when they did? It seemed to me like they were going to give him a little bit more time, and I don't know. I guess I was a little bit surprised when they fired him. Were you?
Yeah, from the outside, it makes total sense to be surprised. They were 2-2, and it was just his third season. But being around it, being here, it didn't surprise me at all. He had really lost the program. He had lost his players. He had lost a lot of his coaches. And that's not to say he was a tyrant or King Kong or anybody that people hated or anything like that. But it just gets old. You hear the same message week after week after week, year after year, and the results stay the same. There wasn't a whole lot of adjustment. Now, that's not to say he didn't try to adjust on Saturdays and game plan-wise and things like that. He did. I will always say that Charlie gave everything he had to this job. He just wasn't very good, and that's the bottom line. I think he's a great offensive mind. I don't think it fits the college game, and I don't think he's a very good head coach. So I think that was starting to really show through, and these players that had heard him saying these same things over and over for the past couple of years, I'd sort of gotten tired of it and grown tired of just hearing the same message but seeing the same results. So it really wasn't about wins and losses. It was just about the direction of the program and where it was headed. And, he came in and took over an absolute mess for Turner Gill. Turner Gill left behind. And in the first year and a half, he really did make some nice progress and clean some things up and get things at least a little more legitimate. And there's no question that this job's in better shape now than it was when he got here. But he was starting to regress a little bit. And I think it speaks to quality leadership that they were able and willing to pull the trigger as quickly as they did, because he wasn't coming back next year. And so at that point, you might as well just cut your losses and see what happens. And I think that explains as much as anything why it happened so early in the season. And then obviously it was a chance to give Kent Bowen a real look as a candidate for the full-time job. And in 6 games so far, he's done pretty well. They're 1-5, but Charlie Weiss was 1-18 in Big 12 games. Turner Gill was 1-14 or something like that. So to win 1 in 6 tries is kind of a good sign. And obviously last week they hung in there with TCU. So it had a lot of stuff behind it, but I wasn't terribly surprised just because of the way that locker room was responding to Weiss at that point.
And talking to Bob Stoops and the OU players this week, they all said that just looking at KU on film, you can see that they're energized, even if they're not getting the end results they want. Had a heck of a game last week against TCU, almost beat them, but they clearly see that everybody's really invested and into this thing, even at this late in the season. What kind of differences have you seen since Clint Bowen took over inside this program?
Yeah, the biggest thing I think is just the passion. I think a lot of these guys are absolutely following his lead. Clint grew up in Lawrence. He's a Lawrence guy. He played at KU. He's coached at KU for 17 of the 19 years he's been a college football coach. I mean, this place is what he's all about, and he really believes in Kansas and Lawrence and KU and the whole thing. So that comes through loud and clear when you meet him. That comes through loud and clear when you see him coach his kids. I mean, his units, the linebackers, the safeties, whoever, he's been the defensive coordinator, so the defense as a whole, those units have shown that, but now it's really infiltrated into the whole team, and everybody's playing with that same kind of passion. This is a guy who at the end of practice will run sprints with his team. That really means something to these kids. They not only do they think, wow, I really respect that guy. He's out here running with us. We're all grinding, and that's what his big thing is. You got to embrace the grind, and he doesn't just sit on a golf cart and yell. He gets out there and runs with them. He gets out there and does drills with them. I mean, if he doesn't like something that a linebacker did, he'll throw him out of the way and show him. And I think that for a program in the shape that Kansas is in right now, that goes so far because it really tells these kids that, hey, everybody's in this thing together. And I know those things all sound like cliches and really, really bad Disney movie type things, but it really is something that this place needed and something that these guys are responding to. So, that's the biggest thing, just that these guys are playing for somebody, and obviously they play for themselves and all that, but right now it means more to them than just playing for their number or their family or whatever. They're really playing for their head coach, and they're playing for the entire program and the guys that came before them and will come after them. So, that's been the biggest thing. It's just these guys have bought into that there's a bigger picture here, and it's not just about you have to go out and get your butt kicked.
And I guess the $1 million question then becomes, do you think Clint Bowen will be the guy?
I do. I know they're going to do a thorough search. I know that that he's not going to just get handed this job. If that were the case, he probably would have been handed it already because the improvement's been impeccable and pretty remarkable, actually. I mean, just what they did last week would have been enough for a lot of guys to just say, okay, you almost beat the number 5 team in the country, and you look good doing it. It wasn't a fluke. All right, here you go. So they're going to do a full search when this thing's over and look at all their options and consider candidates, probably a dozen of them before it's all said and done. But at the end of the day, they're not going to find anyone that wants to be here more than him. They're not going to find anyone that has the support of the community more than him. They're not going to find anyone probably that will be as much a financial bargain as he will be. And who knows what he'll do with it, but I think the belief is that if you can give the guy 5 years, just leave him alone, then 5 years from now, this program will be in much better shape than it is right now. And if for no other reason than just passion, hard work, determination, just believing in the program and the product. And I think that they'll look at some guys, and I think that he's probably already cemented himself into the final 2 or final 3. But I think it's the right move to do the full search. I think they've got to do that. They can't just get punch drunk off of a few good efforts. They've really got to make sure that this guy is the right guy. But when it's all said and done, I do think that that's probably who they'll end up with. And I think KU could do a lot worse. They've certainly proven that with the last 2 hires.
If they don't go with Clint Bowen, who else have you heard, or who else stands out as somebody that is a potential candidate for that job?
Yeah, the biggest name, or maybe not the biggest name, but the one that I keep hearing that has the most merit, I think, is David Beatty. He was he was a guy who came through here a couple of times as a wide receivers coach and spent some time on Mangino's staff and also with Turner Gill. And you know, so he gets it a little bit too. I mean, I think that's a real important factor for this hire, that they're looking for somebody who knows Kansas. If you go hire, and I'm not saying Chad Morris would come here, but if you go hire Chad Morris or a guy like Chad Morris, he's got to spend a year, maybe two, just figuring out the landscape, figuring out the culture, figuring out what works here, what doesn't work here, and that's lost time, you know. So I think a guy that's been here before and knows, at least has that head start on what KU is all about, and that's why Clint's such a viable candidate, because he knows it inside and out. But I think that David Beatty is a guy that knows that a little bit, has a great reputation recruiting Texas, which is obviously huge for every team in the Big 12. And, you know, he's destined to become a head coach someday, so he would be an interesting name to keep an eye on. He's at A&M right now. He's their recruiting coordinator and receivers coach there. That's a pretty big leap to go from that. You know, usually you jump as a coordinator, and he's only been a coordinator 1 year, and that was at Rice. So it's hard to say that that's an automatic, and it's hard to say at this point, it's hard to say that that's better than what Clint Bowen presents. But he's definitely a big name. Another guy is Ed Warner, who spent some time here. He was the offensive coordinator here when Todd Reesing was here and breaking all those records and doing what he did. So he's the offensive line coach up at Ohio State right now. That's another name that comes up, but I wouldn't suspect that he's really that much in the running at this point. So, you know, a couple other guys, maybe lesser-known names. Tim Beck is the Nebraska offensive coordinator right now. He's another guy. Also came through Kansas, just a limited time for him, but, you know, he's really doing some things with that Cornhusker offense, and that's another guy who seems to be, you know, on his way to becoming a head coach sooner rather than later. So, you know, those aren't names that are going to set the world on fire, and those certainly aren't names that will be in the mix for the Florida opening or anything like that. But, you know, that's the biggest challenge for KU right now. They've got to kind of embrace what they are. You know, I've heard people say, it's crazy. You guys read message boards as much as anyone, I'm sure, but you know, you see these ridiculous claims from people saying, well, we should go get David Shaw. You know, well, he's not leaving Stanford. That's a newsflash, you know. And somebody said the other day, well, Dan Mullen would be a good fit. Well, he's not leaving either, you know. So I think because of the elite status of the basketball program here, the football fans that cross over have a hard time understanding that it's a totally different animal, and you got to find that guy like Clint Bowen. You got to find that guy like David Beatty. I mean, that's what they found in Mark Mangino when they got him from OU. You know, I mean, he was absolutely that kind of guy, and that's what Kansas needs. That's what Kansas will get. You know, and the idea of these big time hires. Of course, Jim Harbaugh keeps coming up too because of how close they were a couple of hires ago to getting him, but he's not coming here either. You know, so yeah. I just think that the sooner people can embrace somebody like Clint Bowen and just move forward with a guy that's going to work hard, that's what this program and really this town should get behind and needs. And that's what makes it so much easier for Clint to be the guy, because people in town love him. There's signs going up all over town, "We want Clint." I mean, there's this place is really supporting KU football like it hasn't done in a number of years, and that alone is a victory. That alone is a reason to hire a guy, if you ask me, because KU football, even in Lawrence, has been a laughingstock and a joke for a number of years now.
You know, you obviously we've talked about Clint Bowen. You mentioned Todd Reesing's offensive coordinator. These are guys who were there under Mark Mangino. I wondered, when you're around town, do you sense any regret that they let Mangino go? I know there were some pretty serious allegations there, but just with the way the program has fallen apart since he left, do you think there's any regret there?
Yeah, you know, Lou Perkins was the athletic director who kind of masterminded that whole mess and created this deal, and he left shortly after that. So there isn't a regret from KU because no one up there was really responsible for it. I think that there's no doubt people recognize that it would have been nice to see what would have happened if he just kept rolling. And who knows if he would have, you know. I mean, maybe he caught lightning in a bottle and maybe the end was up for him anyway as far as success. But, again, you know, stability is such an important thing. And I think he had established the culture. He had established what Clint Bowen is really trying to bring back. I mean, Bowen was on Mangino's staff, and he's made no secrets right now about the fact that he's trying to reinstall and reinstill a lot of the things that were staples of Mangino's time here. So, yeah, I think people really do regret that he had to go the way he had to go, and whether it was right or wrong is kind of up to each person's opinion on the matter. But it wasn't pretty, and either way you look at it, and I think people all over town still, I mean, as recently as the beginning of this year, people were still hoping that Mangino would come back, and that's a pipe dream. And then once KU kind of put it on him in that victory over Iowa State and made his offense there look pretty pedestrian, that kind of ended some of that talk. I think people realized, well, Quentin Bowen just totally outcoached Mangino. Maybe we do have our guy, So there, but that's a guy that, for as long as I've been on the beat, I mean, you don't go a week without hearing his name come up. You've still got a bunch of people that are really passionate about what he did, and he still has a strong cult following, and understandably so. I mean, he had this place rolling, and they didn't win every game, but even the games they didn't win, the people could stand behind him and be proud of what the product was on the field. And KU was known for toughness and discipline and those types of things that have completely gone away over the last few years. So, I think they miss him a lot, but I think that might be some of what's got people excited about Bowen too, is that he's a connection to that past. He's a link there, and he flat out said when he was introduced as the interim coach, I've seen it done right here. I played for Glenn Mason and I coached for Mark Mangino. I know what it takes, and I'm not going to try to do anything special. I'm just going to try to take that blueprint that those guys had and put it in and see what happens. So, there's something to admire there too. I think this is a guy who's not trying to act like he's the next young hotshot coach in the world. I mean, he's just going to do what other guys taught him to do.
And Matt, moving on to this team this year, talking to the people on the OU side, the defense keeps coming up, and how good that unit is. What is it that's made KU's defense so solid?
Well, I mean, it starts with Bowen and the way he coaches and the way he's got had these guys for the last couple of years, really, playing with Ben Heaney type efforts. Heaney's a guy that everybody in the conference knows, and a lot of teams will have a guy like that who will be the only guy that's like that, and that hasn't been the case here. I mean, everybody on this defense has kind of followed Heaney's lead, and they fly to the football, and they play hard, and they hit, and they're physical, and they kind of like that mentality, so these guys they have a lot of personal pride. And I mean, before the season started, their goal, and they had no secret, they were not hiding it at all. They said they wanted to be the best defense in the Big 12, and they thought they could be. And at times I think they've shown that's not that crazy of a statement. I mean, they've really played well in some games. What's hurt them in the past couple of years and at the start of this year was their offense was just so anemic that they were out there the whole time. So I don't care how good your defense is. If you're out on the field all the time against Big 12 offenses, you're going to crack, you're going to break down, and that happened a lot. I think if they just had an average offense over the past couple of years, this team would have won more games. They would have looked a lot better, and that defense would have really gotten more credit for being just as solid as it is. I mean, their cornerbacks are potential NFL guys. Ja'Cory Shepherd has been as good as anyone maybe in the country. He's I think second in the nation in passes defended with like 15 or 16 pass breakups and 2 or 3 interceptions, something like that. Dexter McDonald on the other side is equally as talented. He actually had the better year last year, and then Ja'Cory's kind of passed him this year. But those two guys are guys that Bowen trusts, and the rest of that defense trusts, and they can throw them on 2 receivers and then go after the quarterback a little bit and just trust those guys will lock up their guy. And it obviously doesn't happen every play, but that's a big thing. And I just think their confidence factor is through the roof. They're not afraid to hit. They're not afraid to be physical, and they've made some plays. So it's definitely a defense that's worth recognizing, and they're top half of the league at the very least, and they've got some pretty talented guys.
And you mentioned KU's offense and how much it struggled historically the last few years, but Michael Cummings at quarterback has done some decent things, and they've got a wide receiver who can take advantage of some of the problems that OU has had on the back end, don't they?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. That's a big matchup this week. I don't know what KU's chances are in this game. I mean, the fact that they just played with TCU makes you think they could go down and be in this game, but then there's that inherent thing that it just doesn't sound right when you think that KU could go to Norman and compete. It just hasn't happened in a long time, so I don't know what their chances are, but if they're going to have any chance, that's where they're going to have to find their success. And Nigel King has been amazing since Michael Cummings took over. He's a transfer they got late in the summer from Maryland, and he graduated down there and was able to play right away. And he's just gotten better week after week after week. And he's a big physical guy with good speed, good athleticism. His hands are as strong as anybody's. I mean, the guy just goes and rips the ball out of the air. So, he's really been a pleasant surprise because Nick Harwell, the transfer from Miami of Ohio, who had to sit out last year, was the guy that everybody was looking forward to and kind of pinpointing as the difference maker for this offense. And Nick's been great. I mean, Harwell's another guy. He's real shifty. He gets open. He catches everything thrown his way, and that's a pretty good 1-2 punch right there. And it's definitely given some people fits in the last couple of weeks. And all they had to do was find a quarterback who could get him the ball, and that's what Cummings has done. He makes quick decisions. He doesn't try to do anything he can't do, and he's tough, and he can hang in there, and that's been a huge factor. And then Jameis Mundine, the tight end, who is a finalist for the Mackey Award. I mean, he's really come on under Cummings as well. I mean, he's a matchup nightmare. He's really big, really athletic though for a guy his size, and those three together have really put this passing game on the map again. And I mean, they had so many running backs coming back with experience and some young guys coming in, and that's been kind of their calling card the last couple of years. It's been their running game. I would have never guessed when the season started that their passing game would be a strength of this offense, but it definitely is right now, and they're clicking. They're not trying to figure out how it's working or why. They're just going out there and having fun, and I think those are dangerous teams when guys are out there just making plays and having fun with it with nothing to lose.
Well, hey, Matt, that's all the time we have for today, but really appreciate you joining us. People can follow Matt on Twitter at MCTait, at MCTAIT. Matt, where can people read your stuff?
Yeah, KUSports.com is our website. It's pretty easy to remember, and I still don't know how the athletic department doesn't have it, but we'll take it. So, KUSports.com. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, Matt, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you bright and early Saturday morning.
That's right. Set the alarm.
Definitely. All right, and that's all the time we have for today. Thank you again to Matt Tait for joining us, and you can check us out every day at newsok.com and every morning in the Oklahoman for the best OU coverage anywhere.